What's going on, guys? Welcome to this super exciting episode of Homebuilt Workshop. Why is it super exciting, you might be asking? Well, because this is episode number 1 of my great guitar build-off for 2021. Yes, it is time to get started. Episode number 1, we're gonna work on the body. We got templates, we got lumber, we got all kinds of stuff. Let's do this. So as I mentioned, this is episode number 1 of the Great Guitar Build-Off series. This is gonna be awesome. I can't wait to see what everybody builds for this. It's gonna be so cool. I'm so excited to announce that we are building a brand new model from Haley Guitars just for this. Well, I guess not just for this, but it's been a model that I'm working on for a little while, and now we're going to debut it. This is going to be the Haley Guitars Dorian. The Dorian mode is the second mode of the major scale, and this is also the second model from Haley Guitars. So I like to try to have some sort of a meaning. I don't just make it up. I like to have it be a little bit deeper meaning than just some random name, but that's the reason. Let's get this thing made. So here's the materials for the body. We're going to make the main portion of the body out of mahogany, and then for the top, we're going to use some book-matched quilted maple. And when we get to that stage on the top, we're going to do some work with some dye that will really give it some cool contrast, some colors, and really make that figure pop. Right now, we got to get this piece of mahogany cut down. This piece is probably big enough to make 2 or 3 bodies out of. It's a little bit too big for right now. We got to cut this thing down to size. So now I've just marked out where I need to cut this piece so that I can get 2 halves for the blank. It's going to be a 2-piece blank, but I'm going to rip a strip off of this edge before I cut it into 2 individual pieces, because this piece is a little bit wider than what I need, and rather than just waste that piece, I think at some point I would be able to book match that and use it for maybe a neck or something down the road. So first we're going to cut this off here, then I'm going to rip the strip off the edge before we move on into cutting it into more sections and gluing it up. I'm going to first use my circular saw to break this piece down into a little bit more manageable length. Then I'll run it on the table saw to take a slice off the end. This is the piece that maybe I'll use for a neck or something on down the road. And now what was 1 is now 2. One thing we need to do before we glue this up is make sure this center seam is nice and tight. Right now I can see just a little bit of a gap in there, but this is really an easy fix, especially if you have a jointer. One way to do that to make sure that the angles and everything are nice and even is to fold the pieces together, book match style, and then we'll run it on the jointer. By running them both together at the same time, this accounts for any variations in your fence. If it's angled maybe a tiny bit one way, they're going to be cut at an opposite angle so that when we lay them back out, the angle's nice and flat and everything meets up nice and tight. I can see now everything fits nice and tight. The seam actually almost disappears, which is kind of what I was hoping for. I'm going to give this plenty of time to dry. I think meanwhile we can start working on the pieces for the top. And for the top, I'm going to use this really sweet set of book matched quilted maple. These pieces are big enough for 2 tops. So first I need to cut these things in half, then we can joint the edge and get them glued up. Now since we're working with figured wood, we can't just run this book match style on the jointer like we did with the pieces for the body. You risk getting tear out in the figure, and we definitely don't want that now. So I've got a really simple sanding jig that allows me to joint the edges manually using sandpaper and a flat sanding beam. And now we have a nice perfect joint that's going to look awesome once we get this thing glued together. Now I'm going to go back to the body. We can take that out of the clamps because, well, I need these clamps for the top. This glue's had plenty of time to dry, so we're not worried about that. Now this step, one thing that I am guilty of is using way too much glue. You smear on a huge, huge thick bead and then you clamp it together, you get all the squeeze out. I don't want that squeeze out on my top. A little bit's cool, but I try to get not too much. Doesn't always happen. Let's see how this goes. Another thing you don't need a whole lot of is pressure. You don't need to clamp these things down super tight. In fact, if you do, you could risk actually bowing these pieces. Just some light pressure all the way across the joint is all you need. And really, I'm super happy with this glue joint. I've got bubbles of glue the whole entire length of the glue joint. I don't have any big globs or anything like that. To me, this is perfect.
And while the glue on the top is drying, I'm going to scrape the dried off glue off the body and then send it through my drum sander just to make sure it's nice and flat. And I'll flatten the top as well once the glue is dry.
So now I'm going to trace the outline of the template with a pencil, but this pencil I've kind of made to offset my line. I've taken a dowel, drilled a hole for the pencil that I could slip it in there. That way I can trace the outline, but it's going to be a little bit wider than the pencil mark. Now you don't have to trace this out offset like I'm going to do. You could surely cut right along your template and be just fine, but there's a reason that I prefer doing it this way. I want to remove a lot of this extra material before I clamp everything together. That way I can get the clamps close to the edge all the way around. I don't have to work around all of this extra bulk. But when you clamp that up, a lot of times you're going to get some squeeze out that's going to run down the sides. Now if I have this cut already to the size of my guitar, it's kind of hard sometimes to clean up that squeeze out. This way, it's going to be slightly oversized so that once we clamp the top together, then I can go back around and cut very close to my template. Then I only have a tiny bit to route away, and any squeeze out that may have run down the side is going to get cut away as well, so I don't have to worry about that.
And now I can cut away most of the waste material at the bandsaw. I don't have to be super precise here because the line is oversized, but I'm trying to cut as close to the line as I can. And I'm going to save these larger scraps of quilted maple for later on.
Now I'm just going to lightly take some sandpaper and go around the edge just to remove any little nubs or little bits that could prevent the pieces from sitting flat together before we glue it up. I'm not worried about rounding over an edge or anything like that because I'm still going to flush trim this. Right now I just want to remove anything that's on the pieces that could prevent them from sitting nice and tight together. Before I put any glue on there, I'm lining up the top right where it needs to be. I want to make sure the center lines of the top and the body are both right in line. And in order to help keep those in line, I'm going to run a screw right down through where the neck pocket's going to go. I'm not worried about the screw hole because, well, that's all going to get routed away anyways once we route it with our template. So now I've got all my clamps, glue, clamping cauls, everything ready to go. One thing that I like to do is just use a little lift. This is just a piece of MDF with a block of wood screwed to the bottom. This lifts everything up off the ground and it gives me full access to the clamps, so I don't have to kind of work around that. I don't have to lift anything up. The clamps can just bam, 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 go right on and I'm good to go. You ready? Let's glue this.
And now we can put our top in place. It's all or nothing now. I'm going to take an extra couple of seconds to make sure that the center lines line up perfectly before applying the clamps. And by clamps, I mean a lot of them. I think I use almost every single clamp that I own doing a glue up like this. What's that saying? You can never have too many clamps? I definitely agree.
I don't know why that step always makes me nervous every single time, no matter how many times you do it. There's something about this process that no matter how many times you do it, I always get nervous and really excited and kind of stressed out, really. And when everything is tight and all we have to do is wait, it's like a relief. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna wait for this to dry.
After waiting for the glue to dry, now we get the fun job of unclamping everything and putting all these clamps away. Now I'm going to use some good double-sided tape and attach my template to the top. Now I'm going to trim away as much of the excess material as I can. We want to have as little as possible left for the router bit to cut.
So now we are ready to route this body flush with our template. Before we fire up the router, I want to mention a couple of things really quick because I have ruined more than one guitar body at this step for not doing things quite like I should. First, it's very, very important to trim this at the bandsaw as close as possible. That is probably one of the most important steps as far as I'm concerned. Trim it as close as you can to your line. It's going to make this step a lot easier and a lot safer. Now you could fire up your router and start making a pass all the way around the body in the same direction, but you risk some serious tear out issues by doing that. Now you can see if I start making a cut around here, when I come to this section, I'm actually going to be cutting uphill. So the router is spinning counterclockwise, and as it catches the grain, it's highly likely that it could start tearing out and breaking pieces. So what we are going to do first, I've got my bearing set up against my template on the bottom. I'm going to make a downhill cut here, downhill, and downhill. Then I'll flip my template over, we'll reset the height on the router bit, and then we'll make a pass all in the same direction. That's going to eliminate any of the cuts against the grain because we don't want to chip these pieces off. Some areas that I've had a lot of problem with in the past, sometimes you can get trouble in the end grain at the neck pocket, and also in these really thin areas where there's not really a whole lot here, it's possible that you can just catch it and break this piece right off. I've had that happen several times, so believe me when I say it's important to do this the right way. Let's grab some safety gear, fire this router up, and make these cuts. And while I've got the router table set up with the template bit, I think it'd be kind of cool if we make some matching control cavity covers with some of the offcuts from the top.
Now I'm going to remove the template from the top and I'll flip the body over and attach it to the back. It's time to start removing the waste material from the control cavity. I'm going to use a Forstner bit to remove the bulk of the material, to try to remove as much as I can first, that way the router doesn't have to work so hard. Once I get down to a depth that the router bit just can't reach anymore, I remove my template and route it to the final depth.
And really to finish this up, now it's just more of the same, attaching the templates with some tape. I'm going to route out the recess for the control cavity cover, and then we'll flip the body over, remove the waste material for the neck pocket as well as the pickup cavities. We'll route those out and we're going to be done. Whew, that's a lot of routing. Let's see what we got. There we go. I'm happy with this right now. I really like this, except that it's backwards. This is a righty. For those of you that don't know, I'm a lefty, so it's always kind of strange to me. I have to pay extra attention when I'm making a right-handed guitar. So I think that wraps up all of the machining for this Great Guitar Build-Off body. There's still a lot of stuff to do. We're going to do some edge treatment. We've got a lot of sanding, but the edge treatment and stuff is not going to come until after we get a finish on here. So now, I think next up, we're going to build us a neck. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure you stick around and follow all of the videos in this series. I'm going to create a whole entire separate playlist for everything for the Great Guitar Build-Off. Also, you can check it out over on Crimson Guitars. Like I said, I think they have a playlist over there as well. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can follow along with all of the builds in this series. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. With a book match quilted maple neck. Not a maple neck, except when you realize that your glue has been out here overnight. A double of freezing. I don't trust this glue. This part makes me nervous every time. Don't leave your glue outside! That's a wrap.